for the minigame master. So we only got the small one, right? And we already got that thing in the front. And it sounds like well, it sounds like a gotcha machine. Or it sounds like a UFO catcher. You know, these things came before ringtones, right? 8-bit. 8-bit. 8-bit is the element. Did you have these things where you're from? We had a few. I've been around long enough to see a few of these. There was one in a bowling alley that I worked at when I was in high school. That the claw machine might still be there actually. Rip. Oh, okay. Interesting. There's still like some, I guess these things are still in theme parks and whatnot in the United States. It's gone. We can't rotate that. I mean, these are pretty spaced out, so we can just try a couple times. We're taking a break from sub-stories momentarily. We're splicing in some mini games that we have to do eventually in between. But I think UFO catcher is probably the thing it's going to take me the longest. Because there isn't any substitute for just constantly feeding it cash and moving the object around until you see something useful that you can do. Yeah, the head of the UFO catcher just hit the head, like the chunky part of the cat. If it behaved consistently, then it would feel less of like a random thing, but it doesn't behave the same. I was about to say, like, if it stayed in that orientation, it's gone, but this orientation is possible. Okay, so you can't clamp onto that. Is it not very fair though, as I never go to a place where you could find something like this, like malls, or my standpoint isn't what does that have to do with fair? There's no fairness in the observation. You either haven't seen it or you haven't. You mean if it's not reflective of the people from your... Well, you haven't seen it. That's... Yeah, I don't know what fairness has to do with anecdotal experience. Let's try one more rack. Yeah, yeah. But I get what you mean. I get what you're trying to say. But fairness is irrelevant to someone's personal experience. You don't visit, you don't visit arcade clubs and stuff, so you don't see them very often. That's very informative. I think it's probably, if I had to deep cut this, it's probably because the modern language, the English language that's surrounding with younger people on Twitch, they keep using the phrase "in all fairness" or "to be honest." To be fair, that's imparting moral weight and sentimentalism to something that is either a yes or no, because you're sharing details about yourself. There's no fairness to, you're not being fair to a fact. The fact is you've only encountered once and you don't go, so yeah, it's good. Well, it's not a thing to you. You're not being, there's no one you're being fair to. It's your point of view. Like I was asking you. That's concerning with something you can't possibly know. And you know, I get to choose if you answer my question. But yeah. That's a really weird phrase to me, in my opinion. Okay. All these racks are horrible. Or horrible in the sense that I don't know how to get them. Pretty sure loops don't work, but let's see. Pretty sure you can't loop the claws in between things. Yeah, it's solid. Yeah, you can't loop in between them. And I don't understand your phrasing about it wasn't about it. It is about it. You made your fairness or interpretation of fairness is about the entire subject. So I would disagree with you on that one. You're compartmentalizing what you're specifically referring to. I think that's okay. I just didn't read it that way. Clipping? Oh, we clipped it. I think we clipped it. Alright, alright. Wait, are all these things different? Oh no. Oh my gosh, I have to get all of them. Okay. Let's try to get the purple one. Did we clip it? Aw, man. Well, we got two things, you know? Clip! Clip! Oh my gosh, that clipping. Alright, good. We did it. What flavor is this? Taro? Is it Taro? Or it could be okra. Natto. Natto! Alright. Well. could try to get the one on the back. Flip. Sega. Sorry, I mean RGG. All right, all right. Is this matcha flavored? Natto. Okay. Not toes. I didn't get it as a question about me. I thought I could just misinform, so wanted to. Yeah, but like that's I guess that's a fair thing, but it is very unreasonable for someone to ask a question in which to expect that the other person is going to be accurate in that way. And what I'm saying is, what your reflex to do that is a consequence of people on Twitch always hyper concerned about the accuracy of facts. But the facts are, it is incredibly hard to have a perspective about a fact. So it's just an observation. Like, the fairness in misinforming is considerate, but it's selfishly considerate. So you're worried about something that I'm telling you that you're not, that I wouldn't be worried about if you're talking to me, and this is a conversation between you and I. So that was just my 2 cents about, I felt it unnecessary that there's no fairness to be gotten when it comes to just sharing what you know about things. It's just an observation about how people are, how chats tend to be over concerned with other. Don't you dare! Ah! Oh, yes, we got it. Wait, oh, okay. We can't get that last one. All right, we're good. I only shared that there was a crane game in my bowling alley I used to work with. It's anecdotal. I also have a little deep cut, maybe a potential pet peeve on the overuse of the phrase "to be fair" or "in all honesty." Those phrases have largely been conditioned and normalized out as filler phrases. So, for example, I use the phrase "for example" as a filler, but I try my best to make sure to use it contextually in a meaningful way. But one common thing that I do is but, right? But to, that's a filler word. Sometimes I don't use it in as contrary. And in the United States, at least in American English, the word like is used a lot when someone is not allowing adequate time to form sentences. Yeah, that's fair. I'm not suggesting you do. At least I didn't attempt to make that impression. I was sharing an observation as I'm looking at other people who chat, right? So these things are kind of fun to talk about or be aware about actively. But generally speaking, when it comes to like speech patterns or things you do out of habit, it typically normalized behavior that you do. So, for example, until someone pointed it out to me, I wouldn't have noticed certain things that I do quite often merely because I selectively spend a lot of time listening to someone. Here's the fun part, Worm, when we're having this conversation. Sometimes it's hard to unsee it as well. So it would be kind of fun for you over time to share if you observed anything that comes up really often. Because that's kind of like the fun part about talking between people. There's no possible way that my life experiences are going to be identical to yours. So when you observe something, I take it in face value. I don't think it has anything, in my opinion, to do with fairness or that I ever expect at least someone I meet who has limited time to know everything about their surroundings. But that's how the internet is portraying it these days, where you have the internet, so you should know all this stuff. At some point, like when you open and share your opinion, we're hyper focused on, oh, wait, but I don't know everything, if this is accurate or not, or this. The idea is, for me anyways, I have gone past that point where I'm not asking for how accurate you can be. I'm asking for just how you feel and how what you think the perception that you have is. So it's rare enough in clubs, right? It's rare enough where you live that you aren't motivated to go and find claw games. So the stuff you do doesn't make you go out of your way to play claw games or look for claw games. So that's how I interpret it, where it tells me a little bit about you. So the information you shared doesn't necessarily give me information about the state of claw games where you live. It tells me something about you, which is what the intent of my question was. We're not looking for facts here. Or if we're gonna argue, if we're gonna look for facts, we're probably gonna work together and look for the facts. But it's what I learned about you. So it's weird in my opinion, or it's less. Is it weird? It's less natural when someone, the vast majority of Twitch conversations I have had, like seen, like other people have, they're constantly arguing about what the facts are. When, ironically, the facts they argue about is limited to their personal experience or their personal knowledge. So they spend a lot of time arguing about what is fair and what is accurate, only to find so little and learn so little about each other. So I hope I don't give you that impression or impart a pressure for you to be accurate. Personally, that's the whole deal with me, I guess. That's my brand, I suppose. I'm trying to push forth a brand. What am I playing video games for and chatting and hanging out on Twitch? It's to provide a perspective. And I think you can totally provide your own perspective. And I don't want you to feel compelled to be worried about being correct, because I'm not correct most of the time. I mean, according to whoever reads the internet more or happens to know something about something more than me, being comfortable just knowing that is great, in my opinion. And then you get to notice things like what I'm talking about. You get to notice some of that stuff and you just take it in. Kind of humorous to find out. Uh, My favorite reward for noticing something is when I share it with someone else and that person can't help but notice it happen. Sometimes, though, they'll convince themselves that they don't notice it, and then that's an interesting thought too. So if you didn't notice it, I'd be kind of interested to see how often it doesn't happen when you watch watch streamers and whatnot, where does it happen or doesn't it happen? So I think it does. Perhaps you don't. And if you observe enough and provide examples, it's a good talking topic. It's a great talking topic. So then we can figure out a bigger picture between the two of us or more people. And then that's when you start building consensus and maybe get a truth behind some of them. That was a slight digression. Not too bad, though. Like, my interpretation of Yakuza is not going... My perspective on Yakuza can be really different, regardless if I know the facts about Japan or not. We get to choose what facts are important as well to us. Unless you really, really want to go that route about being correct about things. I mean, I did spend a really long time and a big part of my life trying to get the facts straight because I worked in an objectively liable profession. And I don't think a human being can live long enough to witness and be accountable for all the accuracies in life. So hopefully sharing opinions and perspectives is what being online is about. I like to think it is. We don't have a problem that we're trying to solve, is kind of where I'm going with this. Objectivity is great when you're requiring to solve a problem. So like the times when you tell me, well, that's kind of weird. I never think that would be that way, or I always thought it this way. That's great. That's what I'm here for. Not, I think other people believe this, so therefore I have to believe it. I mean, it's good to be aware of that stuff. It tells us about what we know about other people. It doesn't tell you about yourself, though, sometimes. What you do choose to know and what you choose not to know, that can be a little telling. So, for example, when I play Yakuza, right? This happens often enough in Yakuza. If I had to guess, say I was a semi-popular streamer at the time this game was released, right? Maybe a little bit later. And the conversations that I would probably hear it at the time of this game release was, man, this game's combat system sucks. It's like, why do people even play when the combat system sucks? That's a person you would probably encounter that focuses on something. So instead of whether it's accurate or not, right? This person, their perspective, if it's accurate or not, if the combat do suck or not, it's subjective. They're aiming to find facts, but they're not being fair. So you can choose to talk to this person and say, oh, well, that's not fair because you have to consider all these other things. And that's the dominant type of conversation that online communities have. Like, well, that's not fair. It has this and this. It's quality unique in here. Or my take is, okay, so this person cares about combat. quite a bit because they only notice that whenever I'm playing the combat parts of Yakuza, they are focused on that. So it's very important to them. So what can I say about combat from my experience in Yakuza so that they can share in the experience? As opposed to saying, well, that's not fair because you haven't, you say this and it's another thing. So both of you are arguing with each other and paying less attention to each other. You're arguing about what is fact or fiction or what is subjective truth or not. So that's kind of what I meant by it's a little weird. You don't have to be fair to anyone. You're only being fair to yourself. Because the only person that I'm concerned with right now is the person I'm talking to. At least that's kind of how I wanted to go about it. And it's worth investing, in my opinion. So like I could have chosen, like other many people, to be like, oh, you know, it's not a big deal. Like, just we'll resolve it next time, or if it happens again, it's no big deal, kind of thing. I don't devalue that. I think anyone who chooses to say something or want to say something and then share something is worth time investing. That's kind of the idea. Obviously, that's kind of naive if you're super popular or you have a lot of people. You won't probably have enough time to address that. But the idea is you don't have to be fair. Your opinions are your own. If I wanted facts, I'd probably look it up. That's not fun, right? Well, sometimes it's fun. If both groups don't know, have a problem, they have a common problem and they want to solve it together, that's kind of fun. You kind of learn about the other person while solving the similar problem. We're gonna need a whisperer now, because I am out of... Yeah, we're gonna need a whisperer here. Instant ramen takes time. Why have I not... Do I go back to Kishu number 1? Kishu number 1. I know it sounded pedantic. I'm gonna have to say sorry in advance if it sounded like I was lecturing, or trying to imply that I know something that you don't. I really wanted to just set the stage permanently, or invest forward in the idea that just say, you know, just stay open and less. You don't have to feel insecure about what you don't know. Because I don't know a lot of things too. So I always just say, yeah, well, this is what I think. I know. All the other stuff, like, I couldn't possibly know the truth anyways. Too many things to take care of. Where is this? So there's no numbers on these sub-stories. There are no numbers. I gotta find them. Is it this one? What the heck? It's so difficult to know. Wait, isn't this... Instant ramen takes time, okay. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh, he goes off to... Wait. Did he really go off to, what the heck? I didn't remember him saying he ran off to Okinawa. No, I've been around Okinawa enough. I don't think we have bumped into him. Let's go back to oh no, it's a goober. Dang it. I was gonna try to RP walk. Oh, okay. Fair enough. Thanks for telling me that. I wasn't quite sure. You definitely are on the mark for that one. I do want to challenge you to see if that's the case though. Your goal is to if you accept my premise, right, that most people argue about facts instead of an accuracy, instead of understanding each other. If you believe that, then do your best to say it's not that. And I'm kind of curious what you get over like the next week or two. Like when you're hanging out and seeing other people's chats, see how you're trying to do the opposite. So if you believe that's not true, try convincing yourself, try looking for every time that that is true and see if you can convince yourself there's enough for both. I think it's a little bit of mix, but in my circle, like my sampling, it's truer than the other way. There are definitely conversations in which people are more concerned with each other's feelings, but not how much they understand each other. And then often the top number one thing is they're discussing whenever a chat goes lively, like there's a lively conversation, is often arguing about the accuracy of what someone said as opposed to the meaning of what someone said. And that might sound weird ish because facts have meaning, but what I mean is the intent. What can you learn about the person by what they choose to share with you? For example, someone could say something highly inaccurate, but very, very enthusiastically. I can tell you about that person and what they care about, and they wanted to share it with you. But then you go out of your way to detract from it and say, wait a minute, but what if we, and I do that sometimes. I might do that more often than I think I want to, where someone would share something and I would like digress off to somewhere, but it would kind of take the direction, it would take the discussion, I would take the reign of the discussion from someone. I try not to do that when I don't know the other person well enough to know for them to know that I do that quite a lot. Like I lead conversations whenever I'm in public, or when I intend to be. So in this situation, you'll probably have to take my word for it by faith that when I'm out about and I am not the one choosing to be somewhere, I often am not the leader. But since we tend to only meet in this type of situation where I'm the person streaming, I tend to almost be in a situation where I condition myself to lead conversations. Not a passive person when I choose not to be. I typically prefer to be a passive person though. So if I'm not streaming, I'm quietly sitting and watching people, because that's just how it works. Oh, wait, I was supposed to go to a ramen shop down here. Stay there, buddy. Click, clock, click, clock. Alright. Okay, there we go. Okay, to fill in on this sub-story, this guy wants to still make instant ramen. And, instant ramen that tastes like this guy's cooked ramen, but the kid's approach is trying to imitate the process as opposed to develop their own new process to imitate the taste. So he's more focused on the authenticity of the process versus um innovating on the process to imitate the final product. And the boy is super passionate, right? Just need a little bit of a nudge in a different direction and utilize that passion. And this guy is wholesomely pushing the boy in that direction. And he believes that he's going to be the next big thing, which is super wholesome. But he hasn't quite nailed it yet. So he must have came back with another sample. Well, how is it? I'm sure the pork bone marrow was thoroughly simmered into the broth this time. I see. You know, for instant ramen, it's not half bad. I suppose I could see it working. I do kind of see people caring a lot about other people agreeing with that they share without really trying to get the thought process of why they agreed or disagreed or something. Yeah, yeah, indeed. It's kind of one of those things like, good, I agree. Good, you agree. So why were we arguing in the first place? Like, well, and then you have to find it, right? And that's kind of where I'm getting at. It's like, so you both just found out that you agree on something. So what was the point of it again? Like, I don't know. For me, this is where in the conversation we have, I would immediately go back and say, well, you made a comment initially about this, and I thought that means you found it very interesting, and I wanted to hear your side of the thing. That's probably what I would start doing. I typically try to, if someone is starting to like third party and disagree or agree or whatnot, I constantly remind myself to relate whatever's happening now to what initially happened. And then when we're having a group discussion, someone lose sight and the resolving case is discussed, the thing to lead back the conversation is I relate it all the way back to the beginning. And then to remind everyone, whoever started the conversation was trying to illustrate this, or at least what I think they're trying to illustrate, and then they'll re-elaborate. So when I have conversations with my friend and stuff while we're gaming, that's kind of how I usually lead the conversation. We talk about something, it elaborates, it expands somewhere, and then at some point I bring it back to the beginning and loop back through the points and then continue doing that. So I just keep looping back to make sure that we remember or try to remember the best way we can the intent of the discussion and whatnot. And it helps with people. Well, it helps me at least personally with remembering the moments. It's how I play this game too. So every time when a sub story comes up, I don't usually say these things out loud, like if I were in a public place or something. But for the sake of the medium, right? The what we're doing, I'm streaming and recording. I can't. I can guess what I was thinking at the time. So say I go to edit this part or I go and look back on this part of the memory. I could guess what I was thinking at this very moment in the future, or or if it was just for myself, I could just stay quiet, go through this experience, And in the future, make it interesting for myself to guess what I was feeling back then or what I was thinking back then. But that is really, really hard. And knowing how you're gonna feel in the future, your future self, know how you feel in the past, that goes into a big digression on how memory works. You can't remember your emotions. You can remember what you recall with the new experience you have that you would likely have the emotions, but you can't relive verbatim the emotions. There are very few people on the planet that can relive that. They're incredibly, they have a trade-off, but have an incredibly gifted rarity to be able to relive something without literally reliving it with no new input of an experience. Generally speaking, the new experience will affect your memory and recall of it. So I'm recording it not to entertain just myself. So now, when I'm saying these things, I'm saying it to myself and to myself in the future, and to anyone who thinks they need to guess what I'm thinking. So I'm thinking out loud, which I do at home personally already. So it's a natural condition that I do. And I'm doing this by example because it's one of the reasons why I remember things. Like, when I mean by remember things, I don't mean remembering specific facts. I remember specific contexts. So I can rely on other people to concern themselves with accuracy. I spend most of my time focusing on the meaning and the bigger picture of situations because I feel that is rarer in a conversation. So when I can provide that rarity to stick out in a conversation, while I can rely on the people around me to be concerned with the details. So whenever I talk with Eric, he's a very exacting person. He has photos and whatnot. So whenever I forget a detail, I can explain it enough that I can find the details elsewhere. And that's how I kind of framed most of my life and my legacy building in these days. I use technology most of the time to give me the facts, but I do not spend my efforts worried about the accuracy of the facts. I worry about the intent and the meaning. And I can just double check myself about the facts. It's kind of what makes me a terrible chemist back in the day. Chemists, you had to remember very specific facts. But thankfully, because of like apps and textbooks and, easily accessible things, I won't have to remember those facts anymore. Like, for example, how many kilometers are in a mile? We had this discussion slightly, a slight digression just a little bit ago the other day, where I was trying to quickly convert my mile uptick, my 2.5 miles, and I was incorrect. When I double checked, I was incorrect. It's a lot longer in kilometers, but I think the point was already made that I run a lot, and now I run a lot, and it's a longer distance than I've ever ran before, like consistently daily, that kind of thing. Anyways, that's a little bit to set the primer. I've been recording now for like making YouTube videos and whatnot, like solidifying this stuff. So I'm getting into the habit of repeating and rehearsing specific things so that perhaps if I say it more frequently enough, it will become implied that my purpose is not to be an accurate person. I don't want people to feel like they have to be accurate. I want them to explain things what they know and what they pay attention to at the time they're doing it. Because it's the best part about being human. Humans are not robots. You can look up information and statistics and stuff if you want. Expecting yourself to remember those things, in my opinion, is really, really hard first of all, because I don't do it naturally. From my perspective, it's a lot harder to remember details. And to me, you have so much time to experience something else than trying to remember something that your phone can tell you, that's kind of my main message now. It's my focus. I asked myself, this is the beginning of the year, by the way. This is the anniversary of when I said I was going to start to record so that I can promote a YouTube platform, right? And I asked myself the last couple of days, what is the main message that I want to get across in doing this? It's definitely not because I have a lot of money and I'm good at production or editing, or I like cutting things, or I'm very passionate about being good at something. Not mostly that. It's about trying to revolve around what the internet has changed people not to be anymore. And that's to be human, to be imperfect, to be occasionally not accurate, but still can convey ideas, to be comfortable around people who are just saying willy nilly things, but earnestly think it's the truth because that's all you know at the moment, that kind of thing. So I'm going to probably try to promote this message a lot more throughout. Um, I think it's the thing that can help many people feel like the internet isn't the internet and IRL. It's more like IRL and the internet together. Because in real life, when you go and have a conversation with someone around a bowl of ramen, the new age thing is when you want to say something, you're probably going to go reach for your phone and fact check yourself before you say it. As opposed to saying, well, I only encountered this once, but this is what I think it is. What do you think? And the other person is probably going to say, why do you think that's important? That's kind of interesting. Or like, what makes you think of this right now? As opposed to, wait, are you sure that's correct? Pulls out their phone, looks at their phone, and say, okay, hold up. Let's get to the bottom of this. Let's try to find the answer to this. And then the meaning is gone. The conversation, the moments has disappeared in the conversation. That, in my age, like 20 years ago, our table conversations weren't about that. It is often just, oh, that's a funny thing you say. Like, we were more focused on being in the moment. And I think that's the new thing that I want to promote. I want to promote that people can be in the moment as opposed to concerning themselves with the world all the time. Conversations and interactions are personal, and I hope they are personal in a way that it's positive forward, right? Anyways, slight digression. Okay, so this guy got a little bit better feedback. He thought his instant ramen was a garbage, by the way. This guy here thought his instant ramen was garbage, and he was giving him tough love to push the kid further to trying hard. And Kiryu agrees. You suppose? Yep, I can tell you put a lot into this. And besides, the marrow thickens out the flavor. So, yeah, I think it should be fine. But that ain't the kind of response any self-respecting chef would want to hear. I need your honest to goodness opinion. That's the deep cut right there. I didn't plan it, but that's the deep cut right there. It's a coincidence. It's still not worthy of Kyushu #1 star, is it? Well, I would say you did a great job in bringing out the bone marrow flavor. That signature tonkotsu taste we're known for here, your version is a slight overbearing. If you can figure out how to tone that down just a notch, the ramen should still have the strong kick to it, but in a way that balanced by the texture of the bone marrow. So the flavors should be complementary. Alright, then I shall return with a superior sample. Just you wait. Oh, hold on. Where are you running off to? To Kyushu? I want to learn how to make the ultimate tonkotsu broth. I'm going to the birthplace of tonkotsu ramen. That's passion right there. I guarantee I'll be back with the perfect solution, and it's gonna knock your socks off. Just wait. Youth. Passionate youth. Can you believe that kid? It's like he never stands still. Passion. So he's already put together a new sample. He sure is dedicated. And he was talking about you too. Said he saw some kind of vision thanks to how you fought. Wonder what that was. Maybe I'll add more heat this time around. So as a callback, the bone marrow problem, Kiryu basically crushed some bones literally by punching people out, and that inspired the kid to think about crushing the bone marrow so that it better emulsifies in the instant ramen. So he powderized the bones, and that's what they're referring to. Kiryu crushed some people's bones, and the kid was like, aha, crushed bones, that's the key to the bone marrow. Not crushing the bones, you know, create higher surface area, and higher surface area interacts with a solution better or quicker, you know, colligative property for chemistry, things like that. But instead, I mean, Kitty is kind of absent-minded. He often forgets what but you know, it's fine. The kid literally told him how him bashing face inspired him. And also maybe he'll add more heat this time around. I don't know if that's a heat reference, like the heat action, but we'll see. We'll just wait. We'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, what do you be having? Can I actually even eat anything? Wait, did I eat everything here? No, I haven't. Chashu. Classic. How much does that actually heal? Nope. I'm full. Okay. Alright. So, am I gonna bump into the kid out here? No. If I had to guess... Oh. Well, if I had to guess I was gonna get attacked by an angry punk, the answer is yes. I'm also trying to digress a little bit more often, because I think that's kind of my brand at the moment. That resonates with people. So I kind of feel like when people are being in the moment, they tend to focus more on negative feeling. Yes. It's a human condition. That is, I would have to agree with you. Like it's, things that happen more frequently around someone's life, that mere exposure of the high frequency occurrence of feedback tends to numb, people in general, like human observations. So things that stick out tends to be highlighted or are more emphasized. So when it is difficult to argue sometimes in this perspective, but generally speaking, a negative feeling is less consistently occurring in a conversation that's living in the moment than a positive experience, or a what that positive experience over time can become is an indifferent experience. So for example, every time you get up in bed, right? Like you go to bed, you get up, right? Every single day. When you get up, that's for someone that has trouble sleeping or getting up after sleeping, that would be the positive experience. But that positive experience over time, when you persistently get up with, a great positive experience, that positive experience will become less noticeable. But when you have a bad day of sleeping and you have trouble getting up, that occurs rarer, usually speaking. And that sticks out more than the one that's more frequent. But if you sleep and have a negative experience consistently, like it even happens with negative experiences. When you have trouble sleeping and it becomes a high consistent frequency, it becomes less negative because you cope with it, right? It's a balance, it's a compromise of how human beings rationally and intuitively cope with high frequency events, even with negativity. It's one of the strengths and also the drawbacks when you desire it. So, for example, coping is a form of normalizing something that may be negative or positive, but we don't ever think about coping as mitigating the impact of positive experiences. Typically, we desire positive experiences, and that's what's called a habit. Instead, we use the phrase a habit. And when it's a healthy habit, we we just call it a habit. If it's a negative habit, we call it coping. In my opinion, like typically those are the words that are associated. But what it's the underlying principle is that the human condition is when you are exposed to something with high consistent frequency, you notice them less. You become potentially indifferent or non-observant or more passively participating in them now. For example, being able to walk. When you were a little kid, the first time you walked, you might not remember the feeling, but it was probably glorious. And then you're as a kid, you like walk everywhere. You try your best to be as promiscuous as possible. So you walk even when your parents want you to sit down. But then, years go by, walking is not so amazing anymore because we do it every single day. It doesn't stop us from intellectually being aware. It's amazing that we can still walk, or we have the ability to walk, or the ability to automatically breathe, or so there are a lot of things that are automated and occur with high frequency. So in conversations, usually the thing that sticks out a lot are the negative things, because we spend most of our time protecting ourselves by focusing on positive things to dwarf the negative things. So when you're in a swarm of positive things, those things have less impact, significantly, like in recent memory, than negative feel. If you're really negative, like for example, the opposite is true, it's just not common for gathering. The conditions, circumstances, the circumstances doesn't promote the opposite very often. Like for example, if you meet a friend and have a conversation together, you're meeting because something negative happened. But it does happen. A grieving or mourning, not grief, like grief in mourning. So when you have a funeral, that's when you expect a centralized negative feeling that is consistent between everyone. So the positive sentiments end up becoming extremely heightened and memorable. So that's one of the few situations where systemically in that conversation, in that environment, it's normalizing negative feelings. So when you go into mourning, it becomes comforting overall because the positive feelings stick out. The sermons, the remembering someone's uh wonderful legacy. So those things stick out at the funerals and mournings because all the negative feeling is just normalized. So that's kind of the reverse situation. And often that plays into pretty much everything because it's a basic human condition, in my opinion. It's a fundamental thing that humans do. And it's, you can be aware of it. It doesn't stop you from doing it, kind of thing. So the thing about the stuff that you understand about human condition is it's a natural state that happens and checks out a lot. However, you can intellectually observe it or think about it. It won't stop your feelings from happening, right? You can try really hard. With practice, you get to choose if you want it to dramatically affect you, which for me, I still embrace it. So for me, what I deliberately do is when I want to experience a positive one or negative feelings in conversations or in an event, I throw myself in a place that I can't predict it. So often, if I want to feel a positive feeling, here's the big brain thing. And you've mentioned an example, you've shared an example once. What is a great example of a place filled with negative feelings, but ultimately the positive feeling comes out on top? When you do something very, very difficult and you have no semblance of competence, like learning a new skill, and at the end of the day, the following day or the over time, the one things that stick out so significantly is the positive feeling of improvement. When you're doing something you're really, really good at, and you do it every single day, you are more likely to come out negative in the feelings. But you can still intellectually know you're improving. It doesn't stop you from feeling like garbage. So, what is a great example? An OSU player, top 500, been grinding all day long, and they got like 1 PP. It's heightened because the reinforcement of negative feelings in a context in which you have normalized all the positive feelings because it happens consistently, that's why the negative feeling heightens. So when you become a specialist, often you continue to gravitate towards the stuff that keeps reminding you do this all the time. That no longer gives you feedback. Now you get only feedback from being reminded that you didn't get better at it. That's the very classical example of, yeah, but you can still do this. And then it takes another person who doesn't experience that to remind that person. And it's still an uphill battle. So you go up to a top 500 guy, right? You know who I'm talking about right now at this point. And you say, wow, but you're still a monster. Like, you can consistently look at that act. It's incredible. And then you try to tell them, like, that's incredible because you have not normalized it. Like me as a person telling this person that you're extraordinary, I have not normalized what it feels like to be that consistent. So I can provide the context like, that's extraordinary. You have to remind yourself you're extraordinary. It doesn't stop the other person who spent almost their entire time. Yeah. So it so here is what I mean by the benefits of being aware of these things. It's not going to stop you from feeling it like initially, distinctively, or stop you from doing these things because it's human condition. But it does give you enough awareness to when you feel really depressed or you feel stuck or something, it gives you some semblance of control to know it is natural to feel that way. But at the same time, it also gives you the power to tweak it a little whenever you feel like you need a tweak. So for me, instead of doing something that I know I'm really had become skilled at, but it no longer gives me the feeling that I'm good at something, I start doing something I'm terrible at and watch how incredibly good I feel when I get just a little bit better at something I'm critically terrible at. So that's kind of like the mix. So intellectually, over time, you can choose to offset what you normally have. You're taking natural advantage of understanding pretty much how your mind works in general. At least that's how I'm portraying it. And it's not easy. It is going to vary between individuals, but the context is not what we're talking about. It's the fundamentals that we're talking about. So the when I talk about human condition, that's what I mean by the phrase human condition. You're learning. I like to focus on applying understanding human condition and applying it to the context that people have. So then you enable someone to find whatever context that's relevant to them to apply these methods. And if they work, it's just one tool that allows you to flip any of your context to your advantage, right? So that's kind of the idea. I'm not an expert in it. I just observe certain things and hope that suggesting it may help them. So in no way am I saying they are the human condition. Without a doubt in my mind is they may likely be because I have observed these. So I'm not saying that everyone, this is like the juice or the life hack, but that's kind of the idea. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, it's that's you've made an observation about it all the time, just it wasn't provided in the context that is relevant to you or important to you. So when we talk about like what you call it, Josh and I talk about self-help books, right? And the importance of self-help books. The thing is, as much as you want to talk about the human condition, which is very fundamental, and people repackage it all the time, including myself, because if I need to teach someone something about a subject or get them out of their comfort zone and stuff, I still use the basic human conditions or like the human conditions that we know of consistently, and then you spin the context in it. What stops people from seeing that it may be fundamentally related is that whoever the person you're listening to or whoever you're reading or whatever context you're observing, it didn't provide the context that's relevant to you. So often I dig for people's context and then I use their context to frame around the human condition so that it makes it, oh yeah, so now you can see the connection between the two. It's kind of like the thing that I always look for. So when someone asks me, well, you don't have to understand what mainstream stuff is, or you don't have to understand what someone likes if you know what the truths are. Like, well, you can't convey a truth if that person doesn't comprehend you. Like, for example, if you knew that to get better is to do X, Y, and Z, so you just say that, it's like these are the facts. You can't reach a person if you don't place it in a context that they can understand it. And that's the difference, in my opinion, between someone who's effective at teaching, educating, and talking than someone who is factually accurate. That's great. You can be a genius. You remember all the details. You know all the facts. It doesn't improve your teaching ability, because a teaching ability is interpersonal. Conversations, businesses, those things have skills that go beyond facts. And to me, that's my call in life, in my opinion. I want people to not feel like they need to know everything. They just need to know who they're talking to. And that's kind of right in front of you. So if you have the tools to do that, insecurity is just, if you're able to express that, you have plenty of time to look up facts. That's kind of the idea. And being in a skilled state is being in a skilled specialist state is a great counterexample to what a lot of people do in conversations, where they see like, oh, we had a great conversation until, yeah, it really sucks for this guy. Like he just shared and I can't help but think about how miserable this person is. True. But it's also related to someone who practices really, really hard and they're really good at it, but they no longer feel that they're good at it. That it's the human condition that's happening there is relatable between the two situations. And those are the two most common things, like one of the most common things that happen online. You're either very, very good at something and you hate yourself because you're not getting any better anymore, or are you? You don't know anymore. You haven't desensitized yourself to remembering. Here's one of the ways to get out of that rut, right? If it's really hurting you, like you really basically feel like you're not improving anymore, the dialogue that you typically get if there's a state that's happening is you try something that you're really bad at, right? Or you play something you really don't like. This is a good one. You absolutely love doing this one thing, but over time you're just beating yourself up. It's like, it's always negative feelings now. But do something you dislike and it will actually heighten when you return to something you do like. So if you've forgotten how good the thing that you like makes you feel, do something you don't like and it will kind of sort of desensitize you or resensitize you to the old stimuli because you had too much of it, right? It's become normalized, but you're desensitizing yourself to all the things you're typically expecting, and you're in response when it occurs again, it feels really good. So um I don't want to use this phrase because it's kind of a myth phrase, so I'm gonna use this very non-contextually because I think it's kind of misleading. The idea of detoxing. So you're sensitizing and desensitizing your neurochemical responses. It's not, the detoxing thing would suggest one is bad and one is good. That's not the case. It's using how your body naturally responds to things. So when you get too much feedback on something you know how to do, it will no longer be special. It will become less special because your body's protective mechanism is to normalize something that happens a lot. For example, if you stab yourself in the shoulder over and over again with a needle, at some point that pain is going to feel less painful. It's a defensive mechanism. Coping is a defensive mechanism, but habit formation is also part of that defense mechanism. You create habits and passively do things because that task is required rapidly. So like if you need to go out for a run, you turn that into a habit, it'll become more and more efficient. But because it becomes more and more efficient, is less and less taxing and noticeable to you anymore. So it becomes less and less effort. And when it becomes less and less effort, well, you're just not doing a lot of work. So when you don't do a lot of work, it's less rewarding. So that's kind of the thing. And the biggest thing that I've tried for a while that kind of works, I'm not sure if I've narrowed it down for myself, and I don't know really how to portray this to other people, except for a few people. You probably could guess who they are. where if you're interested in completion, right? Like if your interest is like, getting accomplishments, that feels so good and it's infrequent and whatnot. The greatest, one of the greater challenges, in my opinion, that occurs more often in people's lives is how to get grinding something feel more rewarding consistently to yourself. So how can you get high effort grinding? So, and I'm not saying we're not talking about facts like how hard you are really grinding. I'm talking about how to make grinding feel like you are putting in a lot of effort. Because grinding is not a form of effort that most people perceive, because you are repeating something you know you can do and you're just slightly trying to improve it. You're refining it. So when you get to the period of grinding, you're passively iterating stuff, except for the little, like the far less difference. So for example, Osu, a good example of Osu grinding, right, is you have like a 10,000 pp player. Say you forgot the value of grinding, of being a 10,000 pp grinder. You are only concerned, your memory and your emotions only respond to anything beyond 10,000 pp. And what I mean by that is when you get more pp beyond 10,000, that one pp, or maybe like 5 performance points above 10,000, will emotionally elicit some a feeling, negative, positive, what have you, generally negative, because 5 performance points is sometimes not enough stimuli. That 5 pp will be far more significant than for remembering that you've done 10,000 pp worth of skill grinding over and over again just to get the 5 pp. It's like reminding yourself, hey, you do know you're performing at a level you can't possibly ever perform at any given day a few years ago. So today, when I was running, it's my second day of running the 2.5 miles, um, which is how do I do this? 3.2. It's like 3.7 kilometers. I'm guessing it's somewhere around 3.7 or 3.8 kilometers. I'm normalizing it to 5 kilometers. The United States is kind of a little weird, or running in general internationally is kind of a little weird. You have the main event that most people run in the shortest distance, when it comes to distance running, is 5 kilometers, but people tend to use miles to measure up to 5 kilometers, but then it became 5 kilometers because it's easier to remember 5,000 kilometers than 3.2 miles. But anyways, it's 2.5 miles, around 3.9 kilometers, something like that. And when I pass, yeah, I run a route. I run this route 5 times. It's a 5 loop. It's a half-mile loop. That's why I use miles for the measurement. When I loop around this route, right when I get back to my starting position, it's half a mile. So instead of using kilometers, I use miles because it's easier to remember by multiplying. So whenever I'm looping around, the moment I get to my second loop and I get to 1 mile, I remind myself, yo, 6 months ago, I would be dying right now. Like I would be barely getting across that second loop. Like I'd be huffing, my heart might be skipping a beat, like rapid beating. Like that's kind of why I started again. So on the second loop, I'm like, dude, I didn't even break a sweat. Like I'm actually, my body was at like cold because it's slightly nippy outside. Then when we get to the fourth loop, which is at the 2 mile point, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling it. I'm warming up. It's like, so I'm reminding myself all the things that I am doing progressively past the point I started. And that's not something you have to do alone in Osu, right? One of the great things about game design is that you get reminded of that. Like a developer, in my opinion, like games like this, in my like that's why Yakuza is like filling my jam right now. To end this digression a little bit quickly, um, completionist things like this. When you look through this, right? Tasks like this list, it reminds you that you have done this. And then whenever I play a new Yakuza game, when I go into the Yakuza game, I am literally and figuratively reminded of everything that I've done up to this point. And then the way they do sub stories, and they're constantly calling back stuff, and then the story is constantly calling back to the story, it's constantly reminding you of legacy. And that's reinforcing, hey, it's like, hey, you might have forgotten this, but you already did this. Like, hey, this UFO catcher really, really sucks, but you already did this like 3 times under a different condition. So that's kind of the feedback that I am using to make the grind actively participating and rewarding. That's to me, if I had a life hack, it's not, probably not a life hack. And like, I don't want to make it sound like you just do this and your whole life changes around. But one of the great drivers of happiness, in my opinion, or consistent happiness, is finding ways to maximize how good you feel about the thing you do most in your life, with the highest frequency. And a lot of people would say something like, oh, if you're like a gamer, right? Oh, the thing that I do most is gaming, right? Because I'm a gamer. Like, well, no, we're not talking about the context. We're talking about the human condition that applies most to your life. And one of the things that apply most, in my opinion, and I have yet to find a really strong counter argument. But each day, I'm trying to see if I can rebuttal this claim that I have, this notion, because I could still make my life happier if it's not true, right? I could find other solutions. But the current thing that I hold strongly and I believe is that 70, and I'm going to say more than half your life, it's uncontested. The thing, the activity, the emotional task, and the intellectual thing that you do most are the things you do automatically or intuitively. So when you find ways to maximize the things you repetitively do, you are tackling those tasks that are guaranteed to happen throughout your life. So you're maximizing them, or you're constantly refining them, and they take up probably the most portion of your life. So if you can maximize those or continue to improve those, you get the biggest bang for your buck on improving your lifestyle. So what is it? What do you think it is? For me, the first one near the top of the list is eating. If you are a very depressed person, if you're struggling with feeling happy or something, the first thing you probably want to think about is your sleep and your eating, because those 2 tasks will consume the vast majority of your life. If you are not working on those, it is worth at least investing some way of making those things become a net positive for you, or at least a net positive from your current state. So if you absolutely hate eating and you think it's a maintenance, from my teenager life to now, one of the biggest changes in my life is finding interest in eating and how to maximize the positivity that's associated with eating. Make it a reason. And I will give you an example of what that turning point was. My turning point for appreciating why eating is important is because I get to meet with friends. I get to stop thinking about work and listening to stories my friends have. It could be a negative story, it could be their gripe or they're complaining about money. It's just something that isn't my problem. Like, what I mean is, I don't have to be broiled and swimming in my own problems. So social eating was the reason I became very, very dedicated to maximizing how much I know about food, how much I know about cooking, what goes where, what are the good places, what is my system in determining what is a great place to eat at, why I like planning to where we eat at. That's kind of how I maximize eating. For sleeping, I'm still working on that, obviously. So like I have routines, meditate when I shower to time with my sleeping, when I work out to improve my sleeping. So those are the things that you're attempting to work on over time. And they will often drive your overall mental state and well being to enable you to do the things that you think, in my opinion, and I would say most commonly, people misunderstand what is consuming most of their life. So a lot of times people would focus on things like what they're doing immediately. So, like being good at a game, right? Oh, this is my game. Like, how do I get good at it? Focus more, practice even harder, drive yourself in the ground even more. Like, well, how often do you actually play this game, and how much of the practice is actually consuming your life in this scope? So when you think about practicing, it's like, well, let's see, this is really, really hard, so I only practice like 30 minutes a day, right? So the best I can do is the best I can do in those 30 minutes. So how else can you support that 30 minutes? Well, you got to make sure you're rested. That involves improving your rest. You got to make sure you're eating well so you're in a good mood. Both of those contribute to your mood, and the mood impacts your performance. So how are you going to optimize 30 minutes? It's such a short window every single day of your life when 80% to 90% of the time you're in misery. Like all the other stuff in your life is unoptimized, or not when I mean optimize, I'm not meaning capitalize like maximize in a way. I'm saying improving over time. So without those foundations, yeah, sure, you could say I practice every day 30 minutes and that was the reason why I got better. Yes. But how much better could you have become if you holistically improved your health, your resting, your spirit, your like when someone feels good, it means to be in peak performance. It's not to be in peak performance for the task. It's to be in peak performance overall for your health. So when an athlete performs well, it's all of the above. And the task you're specifically doing almost represents a really tiny portion. And this is backed, in my opinion. When I mean backed, this coincides with research. And what I mean by research is what we understand currently about the methodology that help fitness and performance. Often, the thing that is most consistent in improving fitness is the health of the person. So a lot of times it deals with minimizing while increasing efficiency of the exercise or the thing you're doing, but not overworking nor underworking. So a lot of times when people say like, how do you get stronger in a gym? Well, 3 sets, 7 to 8 reps each set. Like, but what if I did 50? Yeah, you'll definitely get stronger for sure. But what could you do with all that time that you just added to your workout? Well, you could rest more. You could eat better. You could probably walk out and touch grass and see the sun a little bit. That's kind of the idea. So you do the task, but the task has such gigantic diminishing returns at the cost of what your body has to do. And the human condition fits that same way. What is a human condition? You sleep and you eat. So when focusing on the human condition is a great way to get some answers while not having to ask yourself, oh no, but what if this happened? What if this happened? That's worrying about context. So you're constantly worrying about context of all the possible 8 billion scenarios that would dethrone your things. But there are fundamentals about humans, things like eating and sleeping. So one of the most successful things I can usually do on top of helping someone who's struggling, like for example, someone coming to me and like, I'm having trouble studying, and this happened quite a bit over my professional career. Like they're like, I just don't get this stuff. Like, okay, tell me a little bit more about yourself. Like, what's interesting to you? And then my goal was to try to find something that they do more often than studying, right? Like specifically how they're studying, and bending that material to something they are doing already consistently successfully. So for one thing that people love, at least personally in my opinion, is gaming. Gaming was one of the things that is still an untapped resource in my opinion, where kids just play games more than they read textbooks. So how they successfully get that endorphin and dopamine, well, technically dopamine response from video games while integrating the task to learn something. And spawning from that is what I'm saying here today. Like this thing that I've rehearsed a lot. It's to contextualize the gaming to a different task. So when you want to understand how your mind works, which is 99.9% of your functionality, it's not 99. When you sleep, maybe is arguable, but you're trying to, when you do a task, okay, gaming, you've already done this. You got to this phase 2 of the boss. Okay, but what can you learn within the grinding? What can you learn about yourself within the grinding? So, for example, I could describe reading a textbook the way I learn how to play the mini games in Yakuza. I could read a textbook and describe how how I approach reading a textbook is relevant to how I solve a problem in Yakuza. It's not exactly those examples, but what I'm trying to demonstrate is you can lift something you understand and transplant it by understanding the process, and focusing on that process may be the start of how you normalize reward and effort from grinding, because grinding is the biggest source of time you can possibly think of. And when you start using that word grind, the daily grind, the eating grind, the sleeping grind, the video game grind, grinding takes up way more time than getting lucky or enjoying something or liking something. Like what I'm saying is, generally speaking, the words we say when we say we like something, we dislike something, they're so short-lived compared to the things we passively live through life not appreciating anymore. And that's anything that deals with something that occurs very frequently, which is literally, in my opinion, grinding. Grinding something takes a long time, literally. Have you tried grinding things down? It takes way longer than other methods. So grinding is a slow process, and that process, if you understand how you get dull as a human being, that's where all your time is. So anything that you feel like you're grinding, I highly encourage, if you're in a place that you're not entirely happy with, like say, this game only makes me feel bad about myself, it's probably the grinding part. Like what I mean is, whatever part you feel you spend the most time with is probably the least rewarding part. So how do you change that? How do you make it a net positive? So how do I, because one of my favorite parts of Yakuza is statistically, and I'm pretty confident on this, is statistically one of the worst received part of Yakuza in this game. And one of them is Mahjong. Mahjong is like, I've been scoping out the Yakuza community, or like whatever the content community is available. The biggest consensus is that Mahjong is the worst grind part. And I found it to be one of the best parts. And that's what I mean. Grinds are rewarding to me. Accomplishments like doing one takes or getting that one completion, it's less so. It's not as much. So what I'm doing, what it's a natural consequence of how I made myself a lot happier in life. But you don't get it's a balance. You don't get both worlds. So while you're actively practicing one, you're kind of not doing the other. So like if I'm spending most of my time trying to optimize my grind for nice feelings and stuff, I'm not using that time to focus on getting good at specialized tasks. So, no, I've become effectively dumber in science. I've become effectively dumber in my metric system. I don't use those things because those things involve things that I don't do very often. I haven't done science very often. My job is not being a scientist anymore. So I don't do them very often. And therefore, they become under practice. But while I'm doing that, I'm no longer feeling sad about it or like focused on it and trying to prevent the inevitable. I'm not forcing myself to spend time on things I don't spend time on anymore. And and that's one of the biggest cognitive dissonance. Hot take here. There's just so that the digression is going a bit long. The hot take is the thing you think you spend a lot of time on. I would say the vast majority of people vastly underestimate the thing that they think they spend the most time on. That's the hot take. And getting them to realize that is enough for them to figure it all out on their own. Because I do truly believe the vast majority of people have confidence enough as long as they're given the spark of awareness. When you think you love and breathe Osu, you do not. You eat and sleep way more than you can ever play Osu. So start there, in my opinion. And what I mean is, this is for individuals who don't feel like they have balance in their life, like a net positive in their life. If you are getting worse and worse, and you're saying you love something and it makes you feel really good, but you're getting worse and worse, it can't be the thing that you think is helping you, right? Logically, you can't possibly, if I appeal to someone's logic when they're emotionally compromised, it's not going to help, right? Someone's feeling depressed, they really want to do this thing they love, but they can't do it all the time. So the truth is, the thing that they're doing is causing it. It's taking up too much time to reach that point while not deviating time for the other things. So if you want to actively enjoy the thing you love even more, you gotta address the things that are literally pulling or figuratively pulling you down, net negative. So when you go to do something net negative, use a net positive approach. So when I need to go and get a job, I no longer feel like the job is going to pull my lifestyle down because I have so much net positive that I set myself up to tackle that. So when you go to an interview, it's not you have to do the interview. It's I choose to do the interview when I'm ready for the interview. So whenever a problem comes to me or when someone gives me a problem, I rest assured I will find a way. I will constantly feel like, nah, I'm up for the challenge. So whenever you start getting into that position where you feel like you're not up for the challenge, or you have to get lucky for it to be successful, you're at a net positive for most of your life. Or currently your life is at a net positive. You do not have enough buffer space, is what I'm going to call it. Buffer space to take on more responsibility. So your goal is to create the net positive before you take on new things. Like today, this very moment, if I hop into an interview, I am okay with any job that I take because right now my life is a gigantic net positive. And I will only take on more responsibility when I understand that I have net positives to buffer it. I am overall happy enough to take on negative responsibility. So when all that's said and done, it goes all the way back to my previous digression about the other sub story in this game the other day about the guy who was going to commit suicide because he was in financial ruins. He was in a ginormous net negative, and because he feels he's a nice person and really compassionate, he tried to help another friend when they were in net negative. So the likelihood of that succeeding is very low. It still can succeed, but it's far less likely than if that person was doing well and they were going to help someone who's not doing well. So that's the goal. And yeah, it sucks that even if you want to help someone very nice, like you're very nice and you're compelled to help someone, in that compromised state, you're thinking it can't possibly get any worse, right? You're in a compromised state where you're net negative, so your perspective is, well, if I help someone, there's no way they can feel as crummy as me because the person I'm helping probably has the same problem. So if you help someone with the perspective that your normal is that net negative, you can't possibly improve upon that. Like that's what you're going to do. You're going to normalize them to your net negative. You hope there are situations that it'll work. That person is in bigger deep doo-doo than you are. So therefore, whatever you do will maybe help them improve their state. But are you actually helping them improve beyond your state? You're incapable of it at the moment because you have not addressed your own problems. So the idea is, as a teacher, as an instructor, as a coach, as someone who has a human responsibility, the first responsibility is knowing where your capacity is first. So I realized that when I was maybe like 24, 25, when I realized I've been burning out really, really hard. And my career goal and job was to help other people burn efficiently, right? Like get them to learn and be passionate. But I'm a crummy person. Like I'm feeling crummy, I'm burning out, I'm exhausted. What if I really took it seriously, like if I really am concerned with teaching someone, if I how can a person who's burning out and doing all the things that are causing them to burn out advise someone else who is looking to have the same success? You're pretty much ensuring that whatever you provide for them, they're going to burn out just like you in the same, like your perspective is locked when you're emotionally compromised. So that's it's super deep cut, but that goes all the way back to my teenage years up till now, and I'm still thinking it's still true, like today. Like I'm still haven't found or met or maybe encountered someone who would reasonably provide an argument that pretty much everything I said just now is highly unreasonable and it's illogical. I would welcome opponents to criticize that so I can refine what I'm saying over time to be more beneficial. But this is, in my opinion, if I had a magnus opus, right, or opus magnus, my book, if I ever go to write something, would largely center around this idea that for higher quality of life in general is pulling the first task is to pull up a mental book or a notebook and write down, what are you doing most of your life, like on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. Get someone else to say that they agree with you. What are you doing to improve those things to someone who is struggling with balance? And that's what I would say. If you're healthy already, you know, if you found a balance, if you want to do the exercise, you'll probably find that, yeah, you most of the stuff you can say about yourself is probably catered towards the overall time expenditure of your activities. That's kind of where my hypothesis is leading. So if you're feeling like you're okay and you're really happy and the things are working, don't fix it if it ain't broke. That kind of thing. But if you're spiraling net negative, you take the reins by addressing the thing that you do most. And as a fun activity, if you're a maximizer, right? To flip the script, if you're someone who's happy, but you want to get happier or become more quote unquote successfuler or more successful, I don't, you know, I couldn't think of the word I was saying, but more successful in your life personally, like for your own context, the exercise is to maximize the things you're spending most of your time doing. And that's where you're going to get your big bang for your buck, because you only have 24 hours in a day. So when your day cycles, your mood cycles, all that stuff, you know, all the facts, biological stuff that's known, circadian rhythm and whatnot. So within that 24-hour cycle, you can continue to work on getting even happier than you are happy. Like go from a +1 to a +5, and then a +6, +7, and this is going to be a hyperbolic statement. Everything else will just follow. So, for example, once you enable yourself into a positive state, your insecurities fly out the window, your your hesitation, reservations, and then you'll be able to open more opportunities, in my opinion. When you have set yourself up with the foundation of net positives, great eating habits, resting, it's irrelevant how competent you are at the time, because you'll become naturally more competent by being able to tackle as many tasks as you want. You have the net positive to encounter anything. So when I go on stream, like for example, I am constantly talking. You no longer retreat to a grinding state. So when I turn on Twitch, I log in, I start the game, I go to my routine, I'm at an incredible net positive. The thing that can hold me back is literally physically. When my voice dies out, when I'm thirsty, when I'm coughing, when I have allergies, those are things I'm trying to mitigate but can't control, right? I can't control if I have allergies. That's unfortunate. But I'm at a great net positive that when I tackle a task, I'm net positive. So when someone says hello and shares an opinion, my net positive mind will tackle that one task with all my weight. So I'm no longer saying things like, hi, oh, how are you? And that's it. That's someone who's barely net positive or net negative addressing a stranger, because they no longer have enough energy or willingness or anything to commit to something. And as a person who streams, as a content creator who streams or make videos, when they go into the process of making it, this is also possibly a tall statement. The successful people are those who are net positive going in. And that goes to another topic that I've digressed on before, which is to live with intent, to make intentful actions. When someone sees me angry, like, I don't know, like Amon kicks my butt, or like I'm complaining about the poker odds or the gambling odds in the mini games, I am intentionally choosing to be in that state. It's not making me frustrated or angry because I didn't have control over it and I don't want to do it. I'm literally choosing to do it. Games are a choice. So if a game gives you a net negative experience, you are, unfortunately, this is kind of victim blaming, you choose to be in that state. So you also have the power to stop being in that state. Whether you choose to do the same thing and find a better way to make it happy for you, or you stop doing it. So that's kind of the two alternatives. But for me, it's the former than the latter. I prefer not to stop doing it. I prefer to elevate myself so high that there isn't a task that can net negative me compared to my net positive. So I'm willing to do most things when I understand it, because there isn't much that can bring net negative things to me. It can be super negative, but I have enough buffer space. And that's kind of what open-mindedness is to me. How do you measure open-mindedness? Ask yourself how net positive you are. If you are 20 plus 20 like plus 20 net positive, and all the tasks, even talking about religion and politics, is like -5, you'll do it. You'll talk as long as you need to for everyone, for you to be to accomplish a task. That's how net positive you are. That's how open-minded you are. If you are closed-minded, it means you don't want to hear it, right? Like, no, I'm in a state, no, I don't want to hear your thing. Like, I disagree with you, I just don't want to hear it. Well, you're just not positive enough and secure enough, right? Security is proportional to positivity, or the net positive in your life. Willingness to entertain someone who fundamentally disagrees with you, because they're problematic. You don't want to deal with it. You don't want to tolerate it. You don't want to learn from it. That's kind of the idea. And as a testament, I'm only going to say this once in a while because I don't like saying what I'm doing. I prefer to just do it. It's the reason why I stream like 8 to 10 hours a day and I don't stop talking in the 8 to 10 hours a day. It takes me like 6 hours ish, in like 8 to 10 hours, including sleep, to get ready to be turned 100% all the time for like 10 hours straight a day. My mind is like wired 10 hours a day. Like, it's just on fire. When stream goes off, it's still pretty wired. So the idea is I have maximized my healthcare, my self-help portion, like eating and like looking forward to eating, sleeping, exercising, that when I go to do some tasks, I don't stop until I decide to stop. And how long that is reflects how efficient I am. Maybe like 2 years ago, even within the Twitch things, like I've been on Twitch for 5 years. Maybe like for most people, 2 years in, they realize their viewership doesn't go up and whatnot. They started focusing on the net negatives of their thing, and it sucks the life out of them. Yeah, they become net negative. In fact, a lot of times they come in net negative and pile on more net negative. That's what I mean by the whole worrying about content creators these days, where they run from stressors by going to streaming only to pile on more stressors, and then when that fails, all the old stressors pile on top of the current stressor. For me, I started streaming when I was positive, but it wasn't that great because it was in a time when I was really low. But today, this day, right now, I've learned from my 5 years of Twitch streaming on and off to establish a net positive, like a great net positive, to the point where I can get on every day and I have something to talk about. The moment I start going net negative is the moment you'll see that one day you pop in, no one's watching, and I'm not talking to myself anymore, or I'm not doing the same things I'm doing because they don't work anymore. So you stop doing them. If you, there's no record of old videos, but when I started, I still talked way less than this, like way less than this, even though I would say most of it was still the similar content, like the similar ideas and iterations. But today, because I added more things on, now I'm thinking about videos and YouTube studio, you know, like the stuff that I'm doing for the channel and whatnot. It has made it even exponentially more driven. Like I am more, it's a lot of work, but since I've already been working at it for 5 years, it's like only a net positive now. So all the daily grinds, the editing, the looking at stuff has become incredibly net positive. And I'm going to continue to do it. So that's kind of the idea. Anyways, long digression. You'll probably see this up somewhere in one of the videos. I'm trying to sort out some stuff. But yeah, big digression. But anyways, I don't even know if you wanted to hear any of that. And because of that, I need to go to the bathrooms. I'll be right back. I need a bathroom break.